Do you really carpool every day?
Almost every day, about 84 out of 5 days a week with
That's
Logan.
I mean, how do you, I feel like you guys need a show like Seinfeld, you know? Like co-founders in a car getting something. I don't know. Getting money? I don't know. Works, right? So I live in Santa Monica, and another attendee yesterday mentioned this when he asked a question. I am watching the scooter wars play out on my doorstep every day. And what I want to understand from you is, you just did this huge deal, right? Motivate, $250 million, I believe was the reported thing. Is that true?
That was reported. That is not accurate.
Right. And if you're unfamiliar with Motivate, that is the company that owns, that runs City Bike and the one in San Francisco.
Ford Go Bike.
And a bunch of other ones. That's bikes. Scooters are playing out. I'm seeing last mile stuff all over the place. And like I said, I'm seeing it at home in Santa Monica. What's the deal? Why is this? I never thought I would start your conversation about not cars. So please tell me how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, if you look back, the vision has always been provide a full alternative to car ownership. And that is expanding in what that means. If you have a short trip and you need to go 3 miles and there's a ton of traffic, a bike or scooter may be the best way to get around. And we want to provide that to our customers. And so we are purchasing Motivate, which is the leader in bike sharing. They do 80% of the bike sharing trips in the United States. We are serious about it. It also aligns our policy work with what is right for our cities. For example, protected bike lanes, safe walking places for pedestrians. And so it's really a big part of our vision to make our cities designed around people and not cars.
And it's a big part of your, your finances. You just raised a huge chunk of money, right? $600 million from Fidelity. Is that all for this expansion? Is that for other things? How are you thinking about where you're investing? Because you still have the thing you're known for, cars.
Yeah, so it's crazy to say this because a few years ago, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, we woke up one day and Uber had 30 times the amount of cash as us. 30 times. And everyone assumed we were dead. And they tried to kill us. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, mostly figuratively, so you know, we've been coming a long way. Today we've raised $5 billion, and it was about survival. It was about building the base of what will become a really large part of infrastructure in the United States. And so we have the majority of that cash in the bank. It will be invested across the board. Bikes and scooters is just one aspect of that.
And you're doing it in San Francisco, right? You just applied for permits for both bikes and scooters, I think?
Yes.
And
oh, I mean, we have the bikes through Motivate.
That's right, yes.
And we applied for a permit.
And what I thought was really interesting about that permit, because I'd looked at some of the language, was around user discounts. You were, in the permit, it was saying that you were looking into discounting things to, I presume, get customer acquisition and all of that. Tell me about how you're thinking about the monetization of those things.
Bikes and scooters?
Vis-a-vis the overall.
Yeah, so our approach to bikes and scooters, we want to be really thoughtful about how we do this. So equity is incredibly important. Making sure, now that we have such a low-cost option, one with shared rides through what used to be called Lyft Line, now we just call it shared rides. That's about 40% up to 40% of rides in cities where that exists. So it's a significant part of the business. And then bikes and scooters. So you have an entry-level product that can help people get from point A to point B that may cost a couple dollars. That's an amazing form of mobility that can drive economic mobility for people living in cities. And as Motivate has done historically, they've partnered, kind of public-private partnership, to create almost transit for cities. We think bikes and scooters has the ability to provide economic mobility. We want to make sure we're investing in equity. We committed $1 million initially to do that, to work with local nonprofits to make sure everyone can access these vehicles. And that's the right way to approach this, and that's how we're doing it.
I want to go back to the competition with Uber. One thing that I think about, I ride hail all the time in LA, as you can imagine. And one thing I'm constantly asking myself is, how are these companies differentiating themselves competitively? You often share the same drivers. You can see the same stickers in the windshield. The scooters are often made by the same manufacturers, the bicycles, et cetera. So how do you make sure you don't commoditize your business, regardless of the mode of transportation? What's different?
I want to start with how we got started.
Please do.
Because I think that's reflective in what you're seeing today and what's happening. And it's still very early in the trajectory of where this is going. And so I'll start with my co-founder, Logan, who grew up in LA. He was surrounded by traffic, and he hated that. It sucks. And he went to UC Santa Barbara, and he made somewhat of an experiment out of himself by not bringing a car and making sure he learned how he could get around without owning or even having a car. And so he rode the bus. He used Craigslist, actually, for carpooling, and then rode Greyhound to get home to Los Angeles. And then he started building a car sharing, kind of like Zipcar program on campus, using university fleet vehicles. And he got the attention of the local transit board in Santa Barbara County. He became the youngest elected member on Santa Barbara County Transit Board, and he was the only person at the table that rode the bus. And they were in charge of multi-million-dollar bus budgets. And he got really passionate about public transportation because the promise of public transportation is fantastic. Affordable, accessible transportation for everyone. The reality is transportation in this country is broken. And the only way he was able to try and scale a bus line that was full and popular was to raise tax revenue.
Right.
And that was impossible politically. They tried. And so that really frustrated him. He wanted to provide great transportation access. He was blocked by the politics of increasing taxes. He then went to Zimbabwe, where he saw people sharing rides out of necessity. Sure. And this happens in many developing countries. And he got really inspired that entrepreneurs were using private vans to pick people up along the way. And so he came back and started coding a website called Zimride, named after Zimbabwe.
Sure.
So my last name is Zimmer, but we did not know each other at this point.
For the record.
That is true. I usually have to tell people like 3 times before they believe me. My background is I grew up on the East Coast, born in New York, grew up in Connecticut. My first job was when I was 16. I was a phone operator in a hotel. I love hospitality. I love the idea of creating delightful experiences, making people happy in their daily lives. And as a phone operator for several summers, I could hear everything that was happening from a customer perspective and tried to troubleshoot it. And if I heard kids in the background, I would send up milk and cookies if there was a problem, and always tried to make someone have a better day. I then went and studied at Cornell Hotel School and started thinking, how could you apply hospitality to non-obvious places? So some people from the hotel school go into restaurants or hotels, and I was looking for another industry that was less straightforward. And so I took a city planning course my senior year. Mm-hmm. It's called Green Cities. And first lecture is the history of the world. 8th lecture is the history of transportation. And I saw an opportunity to increase occupancy and lower cost and deliver better service.
So so are you saying that your origin story is different and that's what differentiates
Well, I'm saying now you have 2 founders that are leading a company.
Yeah.
In maybe what is 10% of the vision,
yeah,
to replace, maybe even less, maybe 1% of the mission. So you have a long way to go. Mm-hmm. And bikes and scooters is one piece on that path. Going public is a milestone on that path. We are not on a mission to bring the company public, which others might be.
Sure.
We are on a mission to provide a full alternative to car ownership and to make our cities better places to live. And that's our life's work. That's what we're committed to decades. And you will see more and more differentiation over the next several years.
As an aside, I think it's fascinating that when faced with LA traffic, Logan decided to take the bus, and Elon Musk decided to dig a tunnel.
Yep.
So very interesting difference there.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about your subscription strategy, because I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, so if you think about how much you spend, the average American household spends $9,000 every year owning and operating a vehicle, yet they use that car 4% of the time. That's silly. That's crazy, but we accept that as normal. We spend more money in the United States on our car that we use 4% of the time than we do on food. That's crazy, but we've accepted that as normal. So what we want to offer you is an opportunity to save money, to tap a button and get where you want to go, to jump on a bike when you want to, for less than $9,000 a year. So we can save the average American household thousands of dollars when we get to fully achieving our mission. And a subscription is a way for people to kind of unlock that mental model of a difference between car ownership and transportation as a service.
And how does that change the economics for you? Is that a better margin for you? I mean, what's it look like for you?
In a sense, it will probably long-term drive stronger loyalty.
Sure.
And obviously if we're at...
That's the key for you.
That, and also just loyalty, not just to us versus our obvious competitor in Uber, but us versus car ownership, which is frankly the bigger thing that we're competing against. And so if you start, basically when people start using Lyft, they're like, oh, I can do this instead of maybe driving to go to a restaurant if I'm going to have a few drinks. Or then Lyft Line, maybe our shared ride service, maybe on the way to work. But then when we provide a subscription, I think it just changes how people operate, and I think that's the most important thing.
There have been a number of studies showing that ride-hailing and just this general economy have made traffic congestion worse. So if you think about your original mission, how do you feel about that, and do you buy it, and if so, how are you dealing with it?
Well, there's been, I think, multiple studies, some that say that and some that say that it's reducing traffic. If you look again at San Francisco, 40% of rides on our platform are shared. I care about the study, I care about what's true, and if that is true in certain instances, I'm not happy about that and I'm not okay with that. And people need to remember, I guess there's a really important study done on car sharing by Susan Shaheen, a researcher in California. And in the first few years of car sharing, vehicle miles traveled, VMT, went up because it was a new service that people said, oh, I can get around more easily. And then they did the study again a few years later, and VMT for those individuals went down below the original levels because they had gotten rid of their car and they had started walking more, they'd started taking transit more, and now I think in the future we'll use bikes and scooters more. And so I think in some cities one side is true, in some cities the other side is true. Sure. We will reduce traffic with the full offering. We've committed by 2020 to have 50% of rides being shared. And now we just made a major investment in purchasing the largest bike sharing company in the country. Sure. To make sure we're on the right side of that.
Let's change gears a little bit. You're doing a lot of work in autonomy. You have said about that you want to do it full stack, right? Hardware and software. Why? Why do you want to do all that? Why can't you just be the platform and leave it there?
Well, we have two approaches to autonomy. So first is we want to create an open network. Where those with the best technology, some of the partners we work with, Waymo, Ford, Aptiv, can bring that technology to our network. You can think about that as the iPhone launching on AT&T. And so we want to make the best place for those partners to bring safe products to our customers. That's half the strategy. The other half of the strategy is what you said, is that we've built a team of between 200 and 300 people at this point and growing, of phenomenal engineers building our own self-driving system. This is important for several reasons. One, we need to ensure we have access to that technology over the next several years. Two, we can build purpose-fit self-driving system that works well for our system and our community. What I mean by that is we don't need to wait for a self-driving car that can do 100% of trips. If we were waiting for that, we'd wait a long time, let's say 10 years. But we could cover 30, 40% of our rides with a car that goes under 25 miles an hour, that doesn't go through bridges and tunnels, and doesn't bother about bad weather. Yeah. And so there's a reason to build it ourselves and to ensure we control our own destiny.
And tell me a little bit about the partnerships. You mentioned a few just then, and then moving out of autonomy, you have well-established partnerships with Didi and Grab. How are you thinking about partnering, building versus partnering, I suppose?
It depends on which aspect of the business.
Sure.
So for us with bikes and scooters, it was really important that we can bring the full package to our customer in a way that we operate it. And I think operations, like hard, on-the-ground, vehicle-type operations, is becoming more and more relevant to our business and will become more and more relevant in an autonomous world. And so we believe we can do that better than anyone else, and therefore deliver our customer the best cost and our drivers the best experience. So there are certain things that partnership doesn't make sense. There are other things that we're not the best at. Manufacturing a vehicle. We will never do that. That is not our specialty. So we will partner with companies. We announced a partnership with Magna, which is a tier 1 auto supplier leading in North America around autonomy. And they're helping us build some of those hardware aspects of a self-driving system. So I think it depends on which part of the business we're talking about.
Yeah. I'm going to come to the audience with questions in a moment, so please prepare your. coming back to Santa Monica.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's been fascinating for me to watch has been the regulatory aspect, the everything from taxes to permits to just dealing with that. And that's playing out with the scooters mostly. How has that been changing for you? Because that was a big issue at the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah, regulatory.
I remember your launch in New York, and it was tough.
Yeah, it was a little start-stops in New York. We've come a long way. I think when 6 years ago is when we started Lyft. It's only been 6 years since riding around in someone else's car was crazy. We were the first at scale to bring peer-to-peer. At the time, Uber was doing black cars and limos. And so they were in the press a lot in the early days because they were so antagonistic with the regulators. But I'd argue that what we did by using someone's personal vehicle, creating our own insurance policy, creating our own background check policy, was a bit more of a new thing than using pre-existing black cars and limos. And we did it from the beginning with the idea that this has to be the safest form of transportation that we're comfortable with our family members getting into. And so we created, as I mentioned, we manuscripted an insurance policy that never existed before and a background check that hadn't existed in this way. And we brought that to the regulator and said, what are you trying to regulate? Why are you coming after us? Is it because you want to defend an existing industry in taxis and limos, or is it because you're worried about public safety? They said public safety. We said, great, here's what we do, and here's what you require for taxis and limos. And in this case, many of the things we were doing were more strict than what you're requiring. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Let's work together, and let's create a new category so you can regulate us. And that was bumpy, but that took a year plus in California. And then we brought that across the country. So we're in a much different place, but we have kind of additional regulatory conversations that are happening in these new industries.
Well, sure. All right, questions, please. Raise your hands nice and high so I can see them from this very bright stage. Yes, yes.
Hi, Lee Gallagher with Fortune. I've lived in New York City for 20 years. I don't own a car, so I'm one of those people. Yeah. I spend a lot of money on your company every month.
Thank you.
Including commuting to work sometimes. Getting to Andrew's point about causing a little more traffic in New York, that has been a problem. But I'm wondering, one of the things that's become really popular in New York is Via, which is sort of luxury buses that stay along a fixed route and you walk to them. A lot of people really like it. It seems to solve that traffic problem. Is that something that you have thought of getting into at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for using Lyft.
Sure.
New York is a special place. It's one of the places where they have phenomenal public transportation. When I worked in Manhattan after school, I think it's pretty fantastic. The subway that is a few blocks away and you can get where you're going for a few dollars is pretty incredible. And City Bike, which is also at scale in New York, kind of the largest in the United States in terms of scaled bike sharing. We've absolutely thought about what Via does and think it's fantastic. And if you look at what we used to call Lyft Line, now our shared ride product, we're about to kind of relaunch it from a technical perspective so that it does exactly that. We want to make it much more flexible. The first way we launched our shared ride product was that we're looking for two people that are going the same way, and we would launch it for a particular geography. The right way, the way we're relaunching it, is around routes and around learning kind of what is your preference and willingness to walk, what is your preference and willingness to pay more or less to wait. And when we understand your willingness to wait and or walk, then we can give you the best shared ride experience. And we can bring that from not just 2 people to 5 people or more. We have already, because of the great drivers on our platform, vehicles with many more seats. So in New York, there are several Suburbans, for example, that exist on the platform. And so those will flexibly be used when there's a route that is kind of built in real time. With 4 people, we can use kind of a medium-sized car. When there's a route built with 6 people, we can use a larger car. So I actually think that we're in an advantage position versus someone that's just one type of vehicle because different routes will have different sizes. So it's coming.
And all based on data. Yes, right there in the back.
So you...
name and who you're with.
Sorry,
please.
Nico Van Summer and NanoPay.
Thank you.
You talked about wanting to give people a viable alternative to having a car. And most Americans are beholden to their cars because of the shapes of their cities. Are you going to follow Google and Sidewalk and reshape the cities?
I would like to have a positive impact on our cities. We just have created a group within our policy team called City Solutions. We want to work directly with the cities and hear from the cities. They know much more about city design than we do. But we have a lot of products that can help. And so this is what I think is this next chapter of our company and the vision is public and private partnerships. And so yes, we want to be part of that conversation. We want to be part of that solution. And we need to get past kind of what has happened, sometimes played out in the press and sometimes played out in the conversations behind those stories of like, hey, you're causing traffic. No, you're causing traffic. Like, let's stop. We have solutions to traffic. Let's create policy that encourages those, and let's solve it together. So I think you'll see a lot more of that, and we do want to be part of, again, that inspiration that got me inspired was a class called Green Cities in my senior year.
There you go. We had a question over here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Scott Schleifer from Tiger Global. Congrats on all the success.
Thank you.
Obviously, your guys' market share has expanded in the U.S. over the last couple of years, and at least recently, it seems like things have stabilized. Going forward in the core ride-sharing business, is your guys' higher priority growing your market share or improving your unit economics?
Our top priority is serving our drivers and passengers, like, period. Underneath that, obviously, we expect to earn the largest return for our shareholders, and we expect to win. We expect to have the majority market share in the United States. We've gone from mid-teens a couple of years ago, probably 2 years ago when I was here, to now almost 40% market share in the United States. We are continuing to take market share. There was reports that things were stabilizing a few months ago. We've taken a few points since that. We have markets over 50% market share for the first time. I just saw a market that hit 60% market share on the West Coast. So again, this is so early. People counted us out 4 years ago, and now we have line of sight to leading the industry forward. Yeah.
Thank you. And I saw one over here. Yes.
Hi, Gary Hallgren with the Arity by Allstate. Question: when I think about the drivers, and it's so needed in your business, but they're being lured away now by Amazon and other companies that are giving people options to be a gig driver, that I can just drive during the day with a bunch of boxes instead of night with maybe a bunch of drunk people. So it seems like it's kind of changing a little bit. I'm just kind of curious about how you lure the drivers in the right way to keep your business growing.
Yeah, that is not our marketing pitch to drivers. But I have been a driver on Lyft, and I have driven at night, and I have occasionally had drunk people. So it is part of the role. I think it's fantastic that there's competition for these drivers. It's great for them, and we now have over 1 million drivers. Last year we had over 1 million drivers. This year we may hit double that have given a ride on the platform. I think more importantly, the conversation about drivers is around the kind of what is the future of work. And we have a system where that was designed decades ago, before this type of work existed, and therefore there are holes in the safety net that, again, this is an opportunity for public and private partnership. We have two options as a company. You have independent contractor and employee. And we have drivers that do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a week, drivers that do 10 hours a week, drivers that do 20 hours a week. It's completely, it's the whole spectrum. But we have to choose between one or the other. And so I think this is an opportunity. We feel a large responsibility around that. The way that we're kind of saying, we can't control what happens. We're trying to influence policy that creates portable benefits so drivers can take them from job to job so that they're free to do what they want to do. The element we can most control is what the driver takes home. So let's say a driver earns $20. They have a cost of $5 for the vehicle and gas. We are working to cut out a lot of those costs. We have a vehicle access program that we rent cars to drivers. We have a fuel program. And so we're not waiting for policy changes to help our drivers. But I think that's the bigger kind of important conversation. Yes, it's competitive, and I think that's a good thing.
There you have it. John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.